So a teacher, an economist, and a developer, they walk into a bar and they take a seat. And they immediately start debating who has the easiest job. You know, the economist turns to the teacher and he's like, you clearly have the easiest job. You get the summers off and you just get to play with kids all day. And the teacher, looking rightly offended, she disagrees. And she goes, there's no way I have the easiest job. Clearly you have the easiest job as an economist. You just pull predictions out of thin air and it doesn't even matter if they're wrong. The economist takes a deep breath as if about to launch into a rebuttal, but instead just looks at the developer. And the developer's like, don't look at me. Just today I wrote a bunch of unit code, fully unit tested. Then I had a planning meeting for the next program increment. Have you ever heard of that? It's basically like predicting the future, and management take it way too seriously. So not only do I work all summer, I have to predict the future and suffer the consequences if I'm wrong. It's like, yeah, says the economist. But your office has a ping pong table, right? So, good afternoon. My name's Adele. Thank you for choosing to attend my session. I'm here today on behalf of Trifork Amsterdam. So there's no doubt that we as software professionals do have a uniquely demanding job. It goes so far beyond, the average computer science degree. There are all these other activities that we expected to know and do in order to perform our jobs well. So just quickly here, who in this room does not have a CS degree, computer science degree? Great, a few hands, yes. My hand is up, not to show you how to put up your hand, but because I'm in that category as well. So it's really nice to see that I'm not the only one here without a computer science degree. And just to balance, because I just need to know, because there's always some people that keep their hands down, who has a computer science degree? All right, I think there's a few abstainers, but it's okay. So my study background is actually in civil engineering and economics, and I have spent some time working in marketing and sales. And these experiences from different areas is where the idea for this talk came from, because I just found myself thinking a little bit differently than my colleagues, especially in my early days as a developer. And I had mega imposter syndrome days, and I still do. But I did learn pretty quickly to leverage what I did know rather than beating myself up for not knowing what others knew. So that's where the idea for this talk came from. It's a mix of my personal experience and interests and just some professions that I wanted to learn a little bit more about. And I'm going to share these findings with you through storytelling because it's the end of the day. You've had a very, very long day, and there's only so much that your brain can digest at once. So sit back and relax, and hopefully you do learn something through the magic of storytelling. So the stories you're about to hear, they center around a team, some issues they face, and how they work through them. So this is loosely based on my team at Trifork, but only the names, characters, locations, and events are different. So in the newly formed team, we have tech lead Malcolm, project manager RJ, and then we have some devs. And being a project-based consultancy, the PO is actually the customer, contact at the customer. And the team have been assembled to improve the relationship with the customer and transition away from being a feature factory to being more of a technology partner. And the team has inherited an aging Java project, and this project could be described as somewhat less than joyful to work on. Now, most of the teams are far from excited for this project to represent their current reality, and immediately one of the devs starts feeling overwhelmed and starts complaining to Malcolm. Now, Malcolm is one of the calmest and level-headed people that you could ever meet. Malcolm, exclaims Lika. She's like, it's taken me 3 days to set up my environment just to work on this project. She's like, the main applications are now running, but it takes over 15 minutes to build. The code base is hard to navigate, tech debt is off the chart, and the documentation sucks. How on earth are we supposed to work like this? We need to get out of the 2010s and into the 2020s. Malcolm responds calmly. He's like, all right, Lika, you are right. This is a tough project, and clearly the priorities of the previous team aren't the same as ours. So let's spend some time pairing, and let's promote that practice within the team. This should help optimize our workflow, and we can create tickets as we go. And although Malcolm, with his demeanour, had already caused Lika's anxiety levels to drop, she was just not convinced of the approach. And the only way she could see out as a junior dev is a rewrite. So over lunch, she brings up the topic with RJ, and RJ listens intently, and by the time Lika has finished monologuing, RJ's lunch is gone, while Lika's has barely been touched. Lika, he says, have you heard of opportunity costs? Lika shakes her head. Goes, opportunity costs occur whenever there's a trade-off between two options. It's the cost of the options or opportunities that you give up when you make a decision in terms of other goods and services. What? Lika looks as lost as a back-end developer at a UX conference. So he's like, let's think about what you're proposing here. So it looks like we have two options. So we can keep working on this old project, we accept lower developer joy in the foreseeable period, or we just rewrite the damn thing. Do you agree? Yes, replies Lika. Okay, so what do you think it would cost to rebuild the worst parts of the project? So the core service and the reporting service. And Lika goes into like full estimation mode. She's like, rough estimate, it would take 3 developers, 12 months, let's call it 2,100 hours. Based on my rate, that's probably 200,000, but we need some senior dev time, so let's make it an even 250K. And he's like, all right, 250K, is that everything? And she goes, yeah, well, I guess we'd have to convince the customer that it's a good idea. And he goes, okay, replies RJ. Now let me ask you, he's like, what do you think the value is of the features that 3 developers could deliver in 12 months? And Lika shrugs her shoulders. She's like, I have no idea. It would be much more than 250,000. Replies Lika. Now she sees where RJ is coming from. But wait, she says, surely our velocity, our faster velocity after the rebuild, will, make up for it, right? And he's like, okay, how much faster do you think we could be after the rebuild? And she's like, we can double our velocity, she says confidently. So RJ starts scribbling on a napkin. And he goes, so assuming your estimate is accurate, in the first year, we produced nothing for 1 year and then twice as much in the second year before the rewrite. Twice as much the next year as the year before the rewrite. And she's like, yes. And he goes, so the end of year 2, we're then at the same position as when we started. And at the end of year 3, we've done 1.3 times the amount of work we otherwise would have. And at the end of year 4, we've done 1.5 times. And that assumes that the velocity of the rebuild doesn't drop at all in those few years. So Lika starts to see RJ's point. And he continues. He goes, Malcolm and I, we've known each other for so long. He goes, I know what we can do with the right team. There is no way that we will finish the year with the velocity that we have now. We can do this. So this is admittedly a very simplistic explanation of opportunity costs. But this was, in this case, this was all RJ needed to do in order to get buy-in from Lika. So we can summarize it as the cost to do the thing plus the cost of not doing a different thing. So let's explore this a little bit further and go through some choices that we might encounter as developers and the factors that we need to consider as it relates to opportunity costs. So with Lika and RJ, we saw the rewrite versus improve decision. And here are some others. So With respect to internal tooling, libraries, and frameworks, we have the direct cost to build, run, and maintain. So, for example, salaries or hosting. But what about other costs, like the learning curve for new developers, or the willingness of those developers to work at a company that has custom internal tooling? Because it's not just the company that has a cost. You know, the employee also has a cost as well. It could result in what I've termed here junk professional development, which is professional development that has low transference to future positions. So it's time spent learning how to work with an internal custom framework as opposed to just using something like Spring or .NET. And we also have the choice here between custom and SaaS. So has anyone here heard of Wardley mapping? One, great. So here's this brilliant method of mapping drivers of value on a continuum from brand new to commodity. And the more of a commodity something is, the better it is to buy it or rent it rather than to build it yourself. Now, computing used to be a value add, for example, but now it's very, very much a commodity. And essentially, that boils down to is the thing that we want to build, is it our core business or our competitive advantage? You know, the thing that separates us from the competition. And if it's not, if the answer is no to that, you know, you need to reach for the ass. And just to clarify, that's the only time you should reach for the ass after hearing the word no. So build versus buy is a discussion we often have with our customers and potential customers at Trifork. So we build custom enterprise solutions. So the decision of why should we go with you or buy off the shelf comes down to competitive advantage. Is this your core business? And if the answer is no, we might advise the customer that they might be better off with going with something off the shelf. And it's not just because, you know, we want to keep the customer happy and maybe come back to us for advice in the future, and it's not just to protect our integrity, but it's just because we get bored building stuff that was already built by other people. So next up is learning and development. Sorry, my clicker's a little bit fussy today. So the opportunity cost of becoming an expert is reducing the number of areas where you know things. And the cost of knowing a little bit about a lot is that deep level of expertise in a particular area. And meetings, as we know all too well, they also have an opportunity cost because the cost of keeping everybody on the same page is interrupting employee workflow. And in the case of maintenance versus development, you know, the classic example is taking on technical debt in order to go fast now. So it's like get the software in the hands of users faster and then maybe need to deal with more bugs in the future. But that's a choice that you can choose to make. So let's rejoin RJ, Malcolm, and Lika, but not from where we left them. What we're actually going to do is we're going to go into an alternate reality where Lika gets her way and RJ doesn't know anything about opportunity cost. So the team decides to rewrite the core service and the reporting service, and this is going to be a big bang replacement. And the customer agrees that a rewrite is the best move, but 12 months without features is just far too long. So they're just like, has to be done, 3 months, hard deadline. So with classical mythical man month logic, RJ just throws 12 developers on the project. And this is how you know that it's an alternate reality, because RJ can just find 12 developers at the drop of a hat. Although maybe in the last year, that's got a little bit easier and closer to reality. So anyway, other than an oversupply of developers and Lika getting away, this reality is the same as the original one. So what happens next is actually quite predictable. So the end of month 3 rolls around, and nothing has been delivered. And despite this, the team are heavily invested in the project and they want it to succeed, and they ask for more time and resources. You know, RJ doesn't want to look like a fool, neither does the customer, so the decision comes, we're going to add another 3 months and we're going to add another 6 developers. Okay, and at the end of these 3 months, the project is still not complete. However, the commitment of the original sponsors remains as strong as ever. Developers are complaining about, you know, rework and changing requirements, but, you know, it's fine. We're still in the reality where developers are easy to come by, so we just, you know, get new ones. Plus, you know, we've come this far, it would just be such a waste to give up on all the work that we've already done. And sure enough, the project gets extended for another 6 months. So, finally, we're now at month 10 of a 12-month project, and the board gets involved, and they are livid. They're like, this project is costing 5 times the original estimate, taking 4 times as long. So how on the alternate earth did we get here? And can you help the board out? What has happened here? Just throw out your ideas. No? Sorry? The deadline kept getting pushed, but it's sort of, why did the deadline keep getting pushed? Yeah, humans have a tendency to do that. What I was looking for specifically today, both great answers, is the sunk cost fallacy. So the sunk cost fallacy is the tendency to continue an endeavor once an investment of time, money, and effort has been made. So in other words, the tendency to throw good money after bad. And at month 3 and month 6, there are signs that the project is doomed, and the most rational thing to do would be to shut down the project. You know, the money is spent, it's a sunk cost, there is literally no way that you can recover it, but it feels like a waste. So RJ and the team, they continue on. And when we're at the beginning of a project and we're deciding the best way to go, we're often less emotionally attached to a specific outcome. But as more work is done, the emotional attachment increases, and we let these emotions get in the way of our decision making. And this leads us to continue devoting resources to a failing course of action. Now, in management psychology, they actually use the term escalation of commitment. And if I'm honest, even though I come from an economics background, I actually prefer this language and the reasoning around it a lot more, because research shows that economic study and awareness of sunk costs as a concept doesn't actually lead people to make better decisions. I mean, I first used this concept back in 2007, first time I learned it. I've done the sunk cost fallacy many, many times. I've fallen victim since then. The knowledge is not power in this case. It's maybe a little bit of an after the fact, oh God, why did I do that? But when we accept that we are flawed humans with emotional brains and we make a habit of actively questioning our decisions, that's when we can actually work towards making more balanced decisions. And if you look at a large and expensive failure, whether that's, you know, a war or a business going under or, you know, a failed software development project, you will often see an escalation of commitment. So I admit this is a very abrupt change of scenery from that stark white to this dark black. But I promise, though, it will make sense in a minute. So we are taking a change of scenery here. So about 2 years ago, I started a weight loss journey again, and I do like to blame the pandemic for the lack of activity and the lack of activity related to that for my weight gain. But in reality, I'd been making poor choices for longer than that. And I tried and failed to get that control back by seeking diet and exercise perfection. At least my definition of perfection anyway. And it would work for a few weeks, but eventually I'd have a moment of weakness, and then I would, break the news cycle, and I'd, give up. And eventually I decided that enough was enough and that I needed help. So I hired a personal trainer and coach. And within 2 years of working together, I lost 25 kilos, I repaired my relationship with food, I took up powerlifting, and I competed in the largest competition of said sport in the Netherlands, which is where these photos were taken. But that wasn't the plan that my coach and I put together in our first meeting. So in that first meeting, we didn't even really talk about diet, exercise, or lifting technique. What we actually spoke about was habits. And specifically, we spoke about the importance of forging good habits rather than striving for a perfect result. So in other words, consistency over perfection. And any trainer or coach that's worth hiring understands this concept at a fundamental level, and they live by it. Now, not every workout is a perfect workout, and not every meal is a perfect meal. Striving for that will just burn you out and increase the chances that you'll give up and you'll revert to your old habits. So, consistency over perfection, Adele, very nice point. But what does that mean in the context of software development? Well, you can actually see this in the principles behind the Agile Manifesto. Please be honest, it's the end of the day, no room for lying. Who's actually read the Agile Manifesto? Put your hands up if you've actually read it. Either. I'm in a generous mood. Okay, great. So, if you haven't read it, do you think that it mentions the word Scrum? All right, well, great. You've read the Cliff Notes, perhaps, or you've heard enough people complaining in the office. So in lifting, we would refer to Scrum as bro science. Now, bro science is where stories get passed around the gym, and it's like the best way to make gains, and what happens is it becomes a kind of a folklore, which doesn't really capture the essence of the original idea. And once it gets accepted as truth, it's very hard to change people's minds. So anyway, Scrum is agile bro science. Now, there are two principles behind the Agile Manifesto that I would like to show you or remind you of. So the first principle I'd like to share is our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. And the second is deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with a preference to the shorter time scale. So what I hear is consistency over perfection. So consistency is working software in users' hands as quickly as possible, respond to feedback with small changes, increment, repeat. And perfection, the pursuit of perfection can lead us further away from our goals, to situations of scope creep, over-engineering, or designing for a future that never comes. And the classic example of this is a Greenfields project where you just start out with microservices and you only have a team of 6. Or embarking on a rewrite because you simply want to scratch your nerd itch of working with the latest technologies. But by being consistent with good habits and finding something enjoyable in the process, you can actually achieve more than you think. So, in the words of Agile Manifesto signer, Kent Beck, I'm not a great programmer, I'm just a good programmer with great habits. Now, you might not agree with Kent's humble self-assessment, but whether you agree or not, the message is worth listening to. Our success, or lack thereof, is a product of our habits. And which then leaves the question, well, how do you form great habits? Now, anyone who's tried to make a behavioral change will tell you that it's really, really hard. But striving for consistency over perfection makes it a lot easier and can take you a hell of a long way. So we're going to go back to RJ, Lika, and the team in their original reality, the one where Lika doesn't get her way and RJ does understand opportunity cost. So they decide to improve what they've got rather than going for the rewrite. This is also the reality where Malcolm is the world's most jacked tech lead. So they get the following output of the core service. So he's also read the book, Atomic Habits. Malcolm's read the book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, an MIT researcher. So, let's just go back to that first conversation that Malcolm and Lika had. What were the biggest grievances of that project? So it was slow build, tech debt, sucky documentation. And the day after this conversation, Malcolm and Lika, they sit down and they analyze the project together. And they review the SonarQube output, which they use as a measure of technical debt. And remember, we are going after consistency over perfection here. We're not striving for perfection. And that also includes the choice of our tooling. So they get the following output on the core service: 97 bugs, 7 vulnerabilities, and 1987 code smells. And Lika's like, see, tech debt off the charts. Where do we even begin with this? And Malcolm, unfazed, he responds calmly, by taking small steps. Malcolm calls the rest of the team over and he takes them through the habit-forming template that his PT used with him when he decided to get jacked. So, step 1, start small and be specific. And the easiest way to do this is to add a small behavior with a measurable outcome to an existing behavior. So what's something we do regularly that we can build a helpful habit into? And in the case of Malcolm and the team, they decided for every merge request or user story, they'll remove at least 5 code smells or 1 bug. Step 2 is to find joy in the process, or at least find a way to make the process more tolerable. So many housekeeping type goals, like reducing tech debt, they're not glamorous, they can be tedious even, but it's important that you find something that works for you. So for example, I find that embedding the housekeeping work in a feature ticket, the way the team is doing here, that's enough for me. I like to know that I've left things better than I've found them. This applies to code that I review as well. And another one I really like is to add a feature with a net reduction in lines of code. But reward can also be other things like going for a walk, taking a ping pong break, like whatever you need to keep the process going. Now, the next and the most important step is to understand that you will slip up occasionally, and that's okay. You are human after all. The key point here is that you do need to get back on track quickly. So for example, if you find yourself in a rush at the end of a sprint, you kind of just jam the feature in there, that's okay. Comes with a caveat though, which is that you only do this once. Because if you do this more than once, it's going to make the habit start to slip, and it's less likely that the habit will stick. And you then risk ending up with a code full of, duct tape and Band-Aids. Now, step 4 is not really a step, it's more a reminder that you need to be patient and honest with yourself and with each other. So it might be that you do enter a period where bug reports or smells are going up again. You can discuss what's happening with your team in the retro and make a plan. So in my team, we've actually had times where we've realized we're short on data, and in order to decide the best path forward, which we actually then talk about ways to improve the amount of data that we have. So at different times, we've added extra logging, updated our dashboards, created extra load test scenarios, and we've compared how many bugs have found their way to acceptance or production in the current period versus the last. Even actions like knowledge sharing sessions has helped so that more people know how the complex and error-prone parts of the application work. This also means that different people can then provide insights into a problem that they don't normally see. Now, it's important to appreciate, though, and this takes a little bit of, experience, is that not every hiccup will require a change of plan. Sometimes you just need to be really honest and adhere to your original plan a little better. Like, how many times are you just shoving features in at the end of the sprint? Like, be real with yourself. But this is why it's extra important that the retros are a safe space. So free from blame, but with space for accountability. So you can be truthful about when things are going wrong and take steps to make things better rather than trying to push things outwards, blaming another team, indecisive stakeholders, burdensome business process. And lastly, it's important to reflect on your progress and to reward yourself, to see how far that you've come. So, for example, has the quality report improved over the last 6 months? Is velocity increasing, if only a little? Is the code review process faster and more effective? Is the project just simply more joyful to work on? Joy, a metric we don't really think about that much. So set a date to evaluate your progress, and in the meantime, you can think up some reward ideas. Now, in our team, we like to celebrate the milestones, even the technical ones. Might not get the customer in on those, but we can have a little party by ourselves. So, for example, getting all of the customers on the same version of the product, or migrating our database to reduce our tech stack. So we're going to go for another one of those changes, all right? Brace yourselves. All right. So when I first came up for the idea of this talk, I actually thought of the professions where I have experience or where people close to me have experience, because I don't want to give you a talk that could be like a Google search or an answer from ChatGPT. So I actually come from a long line of teachers. There are about 25 of them in my extended family. My extended Catholic family. So my mother was one of 12, and my mother is one of 7. So with that field to play in, I was sure I'd cover some great teaching wisdom. I was so confident, I even put it in the title when I answered the CFP. And I thought the insight would be something like, oh, every child is unique, or, that would translate to every project is unique, or every team is unique. But as I got to work and started collecting everybody's input, I found myself actually getting pushed in a different direction. And overwhelmingly, a different theme started coming up. Relationships first. Now, call me oblivious, but this isn't really the first thing I think of when I think of teachers. I think of overworked, underpaid, underappreciated. But when I really thought about it, I realized that even though my family's huge, my mum still has updates for me whenever I call her. Like cousin Barry's up to this and cousin Yoli's up to that. And they even have a family reunion every few years. They fly in from all over Australia. And this is properly organized with invitations and a venue and catering. There's even entertainment. They're the entertainment, but still. I'm convinced that at least part of the reason they stay so connected is because of all the teachers making an effort to make sure to keep everyone in the loop, like a living, breathing example of relationships first. So successful teachers maintain a web of relationships with people, all of which have different needs. The rationale being that if you can't connect with them, then you can't teach them. And this extends far beyond the student. This includes the student's families, other teachers, administrators, education department. The list goes on. So then it becomes, if you can't connect with them, then you can't rely on them, ask a favor of them, do your best work with them, trust them, take risks with them. So put your hand up if you're an extrovert. We have an ambivert here, all right. So not too many hands. It's fine, it's a tech conference. You're another ambivert. Okay, so this is a tech conference. This is expected. So believe it or not, excuse me, despite the fact that I am on the stage, I am actually an introvert. And building relationships doesn't actually come naturally to me. I have to make a conscious effort, and I don't always get it right. It usually takes me months before I strike up a conversation with the new starters. We only have like 1 or 2 a month, but somehow I just always have a backlog. And to let you in a little secret, one of the reasons I actually do conference speaking and enjoy conference speaking is because it gives people a reason to come up and talk to me. Have another speaker in the front row also nodding. Because then I don't have to go up to people and be awkward and start a conversation, because trust me, it would be really, really awkward. So please, yes, shameless request, come up, say hello. Would love to. Jodie would love it as well. See her talk tomorrow. So one day at lunch, Lika is chatting with a developer from another team, Yoast. And even though they see each other nearly every day, this is the first time that they've actually sat down and had a proper conversation. And they start discussing their projects, and it doesn't take long until Yoast starts complaining that his project needs a rewrite. And Lika, she just can't help but let out a little giggle. And Yoast is like, what are you laughing at? He's feeling a little bit judged here. No wonder he didn't talk to her for 3 months. And she's like, I'm sorry, Yoast. She's like, you sound exactly like me from a few months ago, and when I joined my current team. And what we decided, instead of a rewrite, is to actually just start improving the project little bit by little bit. And at first it seemed really, really overwhelming, but we've actually made some really good progress. And, Yoast, he's intrigued. He's like, deep down, he knows that a rewrite is doomed to fail. He just doesn't really know any other way. And he's really frustrated. So he's like, would you mind sharing your approach with my team? Because some of the other teams are also struggling as well, not just my team. So they'd love some tips on how to reduce the tech debt. Would you be open to having a lunchtime session with us? Lika, she looks hesitant. She's like, ugh. Yoast is like, look, it doesn't need to be too formal. Just, give a lightning talk, and then we'll just break up into some groups and talk about it. And he's like, you know what? I know that you're a big introvert, just like me. So this would be a nice way to get to know more people in the company. He's like, I'm sick of trying to strike up conversations at the coffee machine. I have literally zero to say about the weather. So the next week, Lika and Yoast, they run their session. And Lika's presentation goes well, and it kickstarts some great conversations. Now, one of the attendees mentions that in addition to SonarQube, they're actually using a couple of helpful plugins to help reduce their tech debt. And now Lika's head is full of ideas, which she takes back to her own team to implement. And within a week, one of the session attendees approaches Lika and asks how they might go about running a session. So Lika and Yoast, they've started something good. And what they've set in motion is the formation of communities of practice, or guilds. So this is where members with a common interest interact regularly to share information, improve their skills, and actively work on advancing the general knowledge of the domain of interest. Now, communities of practice are organic, self-directed, and they're a great example of putting relationships first. They're a great example of putting relationships first, just like my family reunions. However, unlike my family reunions, the entertainment consists of robust discussions as opposed to my Uncle Frank's robust share impersonation. So, several months have passed, and the team has made some good progress with their technical debt. And Malcolm brings a small gift for each member of the team. More importantly, especially for Lika, is that working on the project is becoming more joyful every day. And the team are in the middle of opening their gifts, where RJ looks at the dashboard on the big screen. And he's like, oof, what's happening here? So the team stop what they are doing, gifts half unwrapped, and they huddle around the dashboard. The disk of one of the core service machines is getting critically full. Malcolm takes a closer look at the machine, and the culprit is a very large and expanding log file. And Lika opens up the client for the message broker. One of the queues seems to be blocked. It has a large number of messages in the queue, and it's just growing and growing and growing. But overall, the response times are okay, and only a small number of users are impacted. And the team just really wants to keep it that way. So Marta, one of the team's devs, she draws 4 columns on the whiteboard, and she writes A-N-C-A. A-N-C-A is a concept that Marta picked up when she was completing her private pilot's license, and it resonated with her so much she brought it back to the rest of the team, and after some discussion about its merits and applicability, the team decided to use it as their framework for dealing with production issues. Aviate, navigate, communicate, administrate. So aviate, in other words, fly the aircraft first. So when there are competing priorities in the cockpit, it's also easy to be fixated on one particular issue. For example, a specific alarm, instruction, or warning. Aviate reminds the pilots of their #1 priority, which is to keep the damn plane in the air. Navigate. So the plane is still in the air, but what's your current position and where are you going? Can you verify visually where you are? Is the destination airport still the best place to go given what's happening right now? So you stay on course until you and your co-pilot have decided on a course of action. And keep flying the plane. So communicate. So should you alert air traffic control what's happening? What about the cabin crew? Be clear with your communication in the cockpit. Acknowledge your co-pilot and repeat back any decisions so that they can confirm. Administrate. Now, this is a newer addition to the model, and it's often overlooked. So it's tasks that enable you to do your other tasks well, and then may inform your decisions. So in the cockpit, this could mean figuring out your estimated time of arrival or how much fuel is remaining. After a safe landing, it could include logging and writing an incident report. So back at the whiteboard, the team considered the first column, aviate. So in software development, this could mean maybe 2 things. Maybe your creativity comes up with something else. If you're taking a more DevOps approach, like Lika and the team, the equivalent's running software. Continue serving as many users as possible and minimize any disruption. But you could also view it as keeping your system evolvable and debuggable. For example, how much effort is it to onboard a new team member, add new features, or refactor? That'd probably be a more sensible approach for a pure development team. And as I said, the specifics of your team might, make you redefine what aviate really means to you. So, but for us, running software, minimal user impact. So Marta asks how many users are impacted. Now, average response times are still quite acceptable. Number of 500s is still low. So as a first course of action, they take a copy of and then they delete the large log file to clear up some space. So this will keep the application running and it'll buy them some time. RJ keeps an eye on the dashboard and will alert the team if anything changes. So we move on to navigate. So one of the queues is still increasing, and it's a very long way from the goal of near empty queues. So one of the devs, Will, bless him, volunteers to go through the copied log file. Meanwhile, Malcolm sets up a job to just periodically delete the log file to keep the disk running, or to keep the node running and the disk not full. In the logs, Will notices that the application keeps throwing an exception. There's an error processing one of the messengers and the listener just keeps retrying, and on every retry it fails with the same exception. Now this is a Java application, so what exception do you think it's throwing? The $1 billion mistake? a null pointer exception. All right. We don't hate Java enough here. All right, nice. Community vibes. So, Will communicates his findings with the team, and Marta writes them in the third column on the whiteboard. So RJ yells out that the response times in the 500s are still good. Malcolm says with the current log file being periodically deleted, sufficient disk space is being maintained. So at this point, the plan is clear to the team. Find and fix the null pointer exception, shut down all nodes of the application during a low use period, wait for the queue to clear, shovel the remaining poison pill message into a temporary queue so it can be inspected, restart the app, implement a dead letter queue, and reassess the retry policy. Now, the last step, administrate, is to create tickets for the immediate fixes, add them to the sprint, and inform the customer. Improvements such as the implementation of the dead letter queue and assessing the retry policy, you can create tickets for those, add them to the backlog, ready for refinement. So in this talk, we followed Lika and the team through a number of situations that you might encounter in your role as a software professional. And in each situation, they leveraged a concept well known in other professions. So we saw RJ school Lika on opportunity cost when choosing between alternatives. Now, like it or not, there is an economic component to software development. We build things that are useful to others. And whether your customers are internal or external, there is an expectation that you will provide the most value for the given amount of resources. And opportunity cost helps us compare the costs and benefits of alternatives and to choose accordingly. Consistency over perfection when looking to make improvements or form productive habits. So by focusing on your habits rather than relying on outcomes, you can start to invest in the process and find joy in that process. So take small steps, check in regularly, see how far your team has come. Agile provides us a lot of great tools for implementing that, but a big favorite of mine is blameless and honest retrospectives. I will say I hate you and I love you in the same meeting. It's how it is. So, putting relationships first to enhance learning and collaboration between teams. We can't claim to be a learning profession if there are no teachers. So we put our relationships first and we find ways to engage with each other. And then we saw Marta apply the Aviate, Navigate, Communicate, Administrate model in order to deal with a production issue within the team. But the model isn't just limited to production issues, although I find it fits particularly well there. You can use it as a framework to plan the evolution of your application. And in the alternate reality, Lika and the team could have avoided some pain had they been aware of the human tendency to escalate a commitment once a large contribution of money, resources, emotions has been made. So we're back at the bar. And the developer has just confirmed that, yes, their office does indeed have a ping pong table. And the economist rolls their eyes. He's like, see. But that's hardly a reason to claim I have the easiest job, says the developer. And things are starting to get heated now, but just before it turns out into an all-out brawl, someone just walks in that shuts them all up. It's none other than Sir Patrick Stewart. And despite their differences, one thing the economist, teacher, and developer all have in common is that they are big Trekkies. And quickly, for you, those of you who don't know, Patrick Stewart is most well known for his role as Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek, followed closely by being the bald guy in these memes. And so astonished, and with zero shame, after a few beers, not speaking about any developer in particular, the developer asks Sir Patrick for some advice from his many years of being an actor and human. So here are 5 things that we could learn from Patrick Stewart in Patrick Stewart's own words. So, be aware of your limitations, but don't take yourself too seriously. I don't do impersonations. I can do a wounded elephant. I can do a really good cow. And I do a variety of sheep. all of which I will be happy to roll out for you. Have an outlet. The only still censor of my life is Macbeth. To go back to doing this bloody, crazed, insane mass murderer is a huge relief after trying to get my cell phone replaced. Keep your balance. It still frightens me a little bit to think that so much of my life was totally devoted to Star Trek and almost nothing else. The unconventional path might be the perfect path for you. One day, out of irritation, I said, you know, all those years with the Royal Shakespeare Company was nothing but a preparation for sitting in the captain's chair of the Enterprise. And lastly, be fearless, be you. If someone says, give me one word of advice, I say, be fearless. And knowing without any shadow of a doubt that what they have to give, who they are, is totally unique and not shared by anybody else. And to believe in that uniqueness. My name is Adele, and thank you so much for your time. I'll just pop that up if you I will share it in the Slack as well for this room, but there's the references I used for this talk. We do have a little bit of time. Yeah, we got 10 minutes, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer some. We can also just huddle around here, that's fine by me. So, room of introverts, do you have any questions? All right, cool. I'll be here. And I'll be at the party tomorrow, and I'll be here the next 2 days as well. So please, as I've asked, come up, say hello. I'll only make it 20% awkward. All right? Bye-bye.